Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're with Dr. Einar Tangen. He's a senior fellow at the Tyher Institute. He's a lawyer. He's been an investment banker. He's just an all-around smart guy. How about that? And we're going to learn a lot. Let's talk.
Well, I don't know about learning any.
All righty. Well, we already started off with oops, I didn't warn Dr. Tangent. So we are on YouTube, we're on Rumble, and we're also on Rockfin. And whenever I start, I have to run a little 30-second break there, video, so that I can get everything up going. But at any rate, okay, so let's get going. I think Dr. Tangent, let me also add this. He's got a Substack. It's called Asia Narratives, and it's excellent stuff. Really, really excellent. Fairly short articles. I was surprised. Very short, very meaty. A lot to them, and I really enjoyed it. Something that I'm going to partake of regularly. So let's start, Dr. Tangent, here. How can I put this? The tariffs. There seems to me this ideological simplistic view of the world, coming from the Trump administration. And I've heard this in the US for years. Back in the 80s, all we have to do is this, taking very, very complicated issues and distilling them down into something very simplistic and saying, we've got this huge complicated puzzle, but all we have to do is this one little thing and it'll fix all the rest of it, and distilling it down. And it seems to me this ideological simplicity is going to be very costly for the United States in the upcoming months. Your thoughts on the idea, the thoughts, not just the tariffs, but the thoughts behind the tariffs. We're victims, and so all we have to do is stop being victimized. The thoughts behind it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Let me get out of the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, you were in law enforcement as I was. I spent a year as an intern in the DA's office in Milwaukee County, and then I did some time as a defense lawyer. I can tell you, anybody who gives me a victim narrative, especially when it's a client, I mark them down as career criminals. And this is very simple. When you believe that you have been cheated, the chances that you'll cheat somebody go up astronomically, because you're just trying to get even, right? Mm-hmm. That person didn't do anything to me, but I my whole life I've had bad luck, and I took the radio from her. There's always an excuse, and Donald Trump typifies that. I mean, he's never gone out there where he hasn't said, "We're a victim, I'm a victim, everyone's a victim, witch hunt, you name it." Now, the interesting thing about Donald Trump is he's always prescribing as if he's, has the magic medicine for everything. But where was that magic medicine during his 6 bankruptcies? Which put lots of small people underground, took away their savings, their business, everything that they had was gone. I mean, you can just check the records to see what he did to them. So his modus operandi, the way he works, is he does exactly this. He says, it's just simple. It's so simple. All you have to do is this. It'll be beautiful, right? That's a con man's trick. They're always telling you, if you just buy this, it's 1,000% returns, all this type of stuff. And unfortunately, America is primed for this kind of Music Man approach to selling you stuff, because they've been so disappointed by both political parties. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or Democrat, nothing changes. And, you look in 1971, 61% of America was middle class. All right. 61%, a solid base of people who, because they believe in the future, because they have a stake in the present, they say, well, we can put aside my needs, my immediate needs, to create a better world for my kids and my grandchildren. When that stops and people just say, I'm in such bad straits, I have to vote for myself. I don't have time or the luxury of voting for a better society because I'm really hurting. And I really do feel for these people. I mean, they've been lied to and, over these many years. So unsurprisingly, last year, when they did a study and they looked at mean income, the median income, and they discovered that only 40% of America is middle class. There's a few percentages that have climbed into the upper middle class. I always find that interesting, parsing out exactly. A few people did well, so it's all wonderful. Everyone else in the poorhouse, and the number of poor has risen. I think there was a statistic I was shocked. Over 70% of Americans prior to the election felt that they were living paycheck to paycheck.
Mhm.
Now, saying they felt that way, I'm not saying that was the reality, but it's a very dim thing. So a lot of them said, well, Donald Trump, well, I have questions, but he's a businessman. Harris, they said, well, I don't know what she stands for. She didn't define herself. She was more interested in making points on the stage against Donald Trump than defining how she was going to solve America's problems. And that, went to her detriment. I used to run elections. I know pretty much it's a very simple game. You figure out what people want. You figure out how you can give it to them. And you try not to lie. So Donald Trump, all he does is, he doesn't. The important thing is never tell one lie. If I tell one lie, you're going to focus on it and you're going to say that's a lie. And here's the truth. But if I tell 10 lies every time I talk to you, you can't keep track. You can have the sense that I'm a liar, yes. But when I say these things, you say, well, what's going on here? Maybe is that true? Is that true? And this is where he has it. In terms of his tariff view, it was a very simplistic plan. He wanted to destroy the existing world order because he said, look, it's not good for us. We're having a terrible time. We're a victim. Right? Can you imagine people in small African countries, South American, ASEAN, who don't have enough to eat, and yet they have been victimizing America? And never mind the penguins, who are still trying to figure out exactly how they figured into.
Well, how about this? We created this economic infrastructure since 1945. We created all of this stuff, and then woke up one day and said, "Yeah, this world order doesn't work for us." And there are people who have been victimized by an order that we created are sitting there saying, "What are you talking about? You created it, and now it doesn't work for you."
Well, and that's exactly but Donald Trump's point of view is that he and America are the victims, so they're justified to do anything. They can ramrod anything. They can change regimes. Anything that is good for America is fine. And a lot of Americans said, well, I feel bad for them, but it's time to put America first. So they were lulled into this idea that he had this magic elixir, and his plan, very simple: I will use tariffs and the threat of our political, economic, and military might to, in essence, create bilateral trade agreements where, U.S. against any country, perhaps not China, but against any other country, it's a lopsided situation. This is the playground bully. Imagine, an 11-year-old on the playground. He looks around. I'm bigger than everybody else. Goes up to everybody singly. He says, "Give me your lunch money, or I'm going to do you in." Right? So people feel that they have to do that. So his idea was, these tariffs. I'll force a new world order in which the United States is at the hub, right? And there are all these spokes going out to every individual country. And basically, it's a tribute system. Their job is to keep America great. And, it's this trickle down theory that somehow when America is great, everything will work out. I don't know exactly how. He doesn't get into those details, but he was trying to force that. So what happened instead is that countries unsurprisingly, when they're being shit on by somebody, they kind of say, hey, this isn't working. We might have to appease him, but we're not going to, we're not going to work with America anymore. They're not reliable. They're tearing down everything they told us was good about the world. They say they're going to take Greenland, Canada, Gaza, and the Panama Canal, and who knows what else will be on his next list of acquisitions. This is this is the law of the jungle. So this idea that America was pushing international norms and things that were about the greater good, absolutely not. So that's been completely undermined. And instead of getting some sort of deal that is going to make American lives easier, what has happened? The tariffs are taxes. They're paid for by American consumers. They decrease demand globally because people don't have enough money in America to buy more stuff. So that creates economic uncertainty and distress for countries around the world. But in addition to that, there are two other things people should be paying attention to. And that is these tariffs and his policies are pushing the trade dollar. I mean, the US dollar is the preeminent way of settling transactions, and we've benefited from it. We've also been hurt by it. It's lulled us into a false sense of security that we can run up our debts, 36 trillion, 38 trillion, add a couple trillion on for just the heck of it. Let's have a little party and add some more debt. Now, that was financed at very low rates because people were buying treasuries because they were settling in dollars and they needed dollars rather than changing dollars in and out. It was just easier to hold dollars in the US. And then you could pay people and they could pay you because they're all paying back and forth in dollars. So you save the cost of converting it into your own currency. Now, he's really done a job on that. I mean, people are now saying, okay, the US had this great situation, but it wasn't good enough. So they weaponized it. It doesn't matter whether you like a country or not. If you have an international order, you can't undermine it because you want to. There are terrible things that happen out there. There are countries that don't like us, but it was always understood the international trade settlement system had to be neutral. All right. So Trump pushed that aside. And he's not the only one. I mean, Biden did it. Obama started doing it, things like this. But this is a slippery slope. And the consequences are that countries started looking for alternatives to the US trade dollar, and that's going to have an effect. Now, why did Trump pull back? Remember that? Oh, yeah, I'm never going to change. Everyone's coming here to kiss and all this type of stuff. And then all of a sudden, while his people are on the Hill, right, in front of Congress, defending, all right, the absolute necessity of staying firm with the tariffs, one of the congressmen or senators, I don't know which, said, hey, by the way, your boss just gave a 90-day reprieve. The guy's sitting there. What is he going to say? Well, did you talk about this with the president before you came here? Well, I can't tell you what we talk about. Okay. But clearly they weren't in the know. But this kind of mercurial up and down, no one knows what he's going to do next. And that uncertainty is as dangerous as his policies. Because if you have a policy in place, okay, I don't like it, it's destructive, but I can plan around it to one extent or another. But if I don't know what's going to happen next, I'm not going to do anything. And you're seeing this. Capital is drying up everywhere. No one wants to invest in a new factory. Certainly, even people who believe in Trump's vision, there's a real question. What happens after Trump? Are those tariffs going to remain in place? If I'm building a business in America based on tariffs, and I have political risk. Somebody else comes in and said, Donald Trump was wrong. We have to 180 degrees, get rid of tariffs, do this. I'm sitting there holding the bag. All right. I invested money. And now what do I have to show for it? So even people who believe in Donald Trump have to have some sort of sense that they're going to get all their money back plus profits prior to him leaving. That means you only have short-term plays that are being put into the pipeline. Long-term, if you go through, I went through all of these companies who said, "Oh, I'm going to put billions of dollars in." Well, if you check it, they always have this caveat: subject to market forces. Okay, and then they have another one. This is going to take a long time, and coincidentally, the time it's going to take takes it beyond Trump's term. So what do? You make sweet words. Donald Trump lays off you, but you don't actually do anything. You're just sitting there, keeping your powder dry, trying to figure out what comes next. And this is not only corporate America, but this is the whole world. Remember, the Japanese came. Okay, what do you want? And the response, literally, from Donald Trump was, "What are you offering?"
He didn't know what he wanted, did he? Well, let me throw this at you.
Sure.
I've been having this conversation for the last few years because, sadly, it's unfortunate. I'm not happy about it, but there's a reality if you're a major market such as the U.S., if you're a major economic force and you go after, Liechtenstein, for God's sake, you go after Monaco or something. Okay, nobody's paying a much attention.
They're evil. You just don't know it.
Well, I forgot about it. But what the U.S. has done in the last few years is two things: major sanctions against Russia, the world's commodity leader, and I might add, grabbing Russia's $300 billion, which makes people now concerned. Do I want to keep my gold anywhere near these people? My money, anything? Do I want to invest? If I'm a company and I think my country could be on the outs and I want to build a factory or something in the US or maybe even in Europe, when I see what they did to Russia, I got to say, but if I get on the outs, they're going to take my money and they're going to keep all of it. I can't afford that. And now they go after the commodity giant of the world, Russia, which, might I add, Russia, was able to, actually come out quite well. And now they go after the industrial giant of the world. And I think the world has to be looking at them and saying, this is lunacy. You go after the commodity giant of the world. You go after the industrial giant of the world, the Twin Peaks of the world. Anyway, your thoughts on the collective repercussions from going after Russia and China? Might I add, two countries that we have seen that have been stable business partners, even when they were in adversarial positions with during the Cold War. The Soviet Union continued to provide oil to Western Europe when they had tanks facing each other. They continued to fulfill their contracts with Western Europe. So these are stable business partners for all of these years, and the U.S. comes in and is now destabilizes its relationships with both of them.
Yeah, I take your point, and the issue is, as Donald Trump said on his campaign trail, he doesn't want the major industrial power, manufacturing China, together with the major resource country in the world, which is Russia. He said that getting those two together is an existential threat to America because they have both the production and the resources, and they could push us out. And but instead of stopping that, he's actually accelerated the process. He pushed the U.S. and Russia closer together. They're now, and they share a border. In the past, we always had this thing where, China has a lot of trade. It's seaborne. They have to take it through all these different choke points, Straits of Malacca, all these places where, it's easy to bottle them up. We have 200 bases surrounding China. We can block their trade. Here's the irony. They're always saying, "Oh, China's going to block its trade." It says, "You're kidding me, right? 90% of its oil, they're going to block their own oil, and they're going to block their own ability to sell things, right? By cutting off these trade routes." No, it's the exact opposite. We have a tendency in the U.S. to accuse others of doing exactly what we're doing. This is, it's a simplistic trick. I say, "Oh, you're lying." I says, "Well, no, wait a second. I'm the one who's lying." I accuse you of it, and people say, "Oh, are you lying?" It's that white rabbit thing that Donald Trump throws out every day. He throws out 7 or 8 white rabbits where they, the press sees the white rabbit and their eyes follow it, and they get all this kind of stuff. So and going back to my old point, which I is related to this, the reason he gave that 90-day reprieve is because he saw bond rates going up. We have 16 to 18 trillion dollars worth of debt that we have to refinance in this next year and a half. And if bond rates go up, it's already, we're paying over $1 trillion in interest out of a $6 trillion budget, of which $2 trillion is borrowed. So it's not only that we have this huge debt pile, but we have to add more debt to it. So in those circumstances, having higher bond rates is, this is sirens flashing, this is serious stuff. Even Donald Trump understands that interest rates, you have to, you're supposed to pay them off. And he can't think of a way in which he can just print money that will work. He was looking at that. He was talking to the Treasury Department. How can we just ignore this? Because he keeps thinking that he has, all he needs is time. A third term, whatever it takes to create this grand vision. But the fact is, this 6-time bankrupt guy is leading America into the largest bankruptcy that the world has ever seen.
I think the U.S., our debt track has been unsustainable for years. You know what I mean? We've been, and now look where we are. And to show what it demonstrates is what you just said: $6 trillion budget, $2 trillion of it is borrowed money, additional debt. Another $1 trillion of it, at least, depending upon what happens with interest rates, another $1 trillion is paying off old debt. It's getting to the point where we're the person who now has to use a credit card to pay his credit cards, and the problem when you get there is nobody will give you a credit card anymore because you don't have any credit, and the whole Ponzi scheme collapses. And it seems to me that there are those of us who looked at the mess of neoliberalism. You know what I mean? Looked at 2008 when everything fell apart, and back then said this thing needs some serious restructuring. And I have argued this is all part of the 2008 crash. That they just put band-aids, you know what I mean, on a split artery. And now Trump's throwing a Hail Mary, which is total madness. But 2008, I think, are you in Beijing? You're in Beijing, right?
Yes, I am.
I would imagine.
But in 2008, I was here, but I was in investment banking in the earlier 2000s. And I talked to the firm I was with. I said, this is not going well. Glass-Steagall, which separated the banks, insurance companies and things. Unfortunately, it was given away by Clinton because he was trying to do something with the medical situation. Unfortunately, that was an unintended consequence of what was, in his mind, a good trade-off. But it has led, and I completely agree with you. This is a Ponzi scheme, and they have never done what was necessary in order to deal with the imbalances that have happened since 2008. I call this financialization. And by that, what I mean is, if you take all the stocks in the world right now, there's 7 times that amount in these instruments, financial instruments. Vast majority, 60 to 70%, depending on which day you're talking about, are simply bets on outcome. And somebody asked me, well, why do you say that, Einar? That doesn't make sense. These are mature people. They have MBAs. Yeah. I said, they have MBAs, and they're taught that you win by getting a huge bonus. How do I get a huge bonus if I invest in a company that's going to take 10 years to build something, but it's going to employ people, and it's going to have real products? But the horizon 10 years from now, my goodness, I won't get a bonus this quarter. I'll get nothing. So what's the solution? I'll make bets on outcomes, and if it happens, I'm going to get a huge bonus immediately. So every time we have an interest rate event where we say they're, when the Fed's coming out, you see these guys lining up huge bets, leveraged, all right, in order to make some money so they can pay themselves a, a very nice bonus for their great work. And when it doesn't work out, well, that just kind of happens. The market went against us. Just let's go out and get some more money and make some more bets and cover all the bad money with the money we intend to make. So the American financial system is far removed. The idea behind having a stock market was to make capital available to those who were doing things, goods and services.
Right.
Now it is just a casino. So absolutely right. There should have been a hard look after 2008-9 at exactly what the problems were, but they were glossed over. So many of the politicians, I mean, they're co-opted. They that they're always looking for money for their reelection, and they're not too picky about who they take it from. And when they take it, there's always a deal. Well, Congressman, we're pretty big in your things. We'd really like to support you. We have a couple of bills coming up, and I hope you can see your way clear to support them. These are important. This is for America. This is what they say. I know. I used to be on both sides of those equations. Not so much asking for myself, but I mean, you had to make deals all the time, and as a result, the interests of America get bypassed by all these special interests who are trying to feather their own nests.
I worked with Mr. John Conyers, Congressman John Conyers' office, and he would say, I spend 70% of my time fundraising. 70%. And another 20%
John was
traveling.
A character.
Oh, he was something else, wasn't he? He was fantastic. I loved him. He was great.
Larger than life.
Yes, he was. But, the other thing is this. Okay. I again, traveling, you look at Russia and there's something there in their economy. They're selling wheat, or they're selling aluminum or something, right? China, they're making the proverbial widgets. Widgets are cranking out of the factory. There you go. You can touch, see, and buy widgets. Having had some experience in corporate America, the financialized economy is hollow to the bone. Here's what I mean. I worked with some guys. They started a company in 2000. They put 16 million together. They start the company. Here's the long and short of it. They sold it in 2016 for 250 million. That was the plan. The whole time as they built that company, they didn't, and they put together pretty good. It was a service company. They did pretty good services. But the whole time, they never built that company with the intent of a long-term company. They built that company with the intent of making it presentable to the Apollo, who really eventually bought it, right? Apollo, at the time in 2016, they were worth like 180 billion, right? And Apollo bought 3 or 4 companies and stuck them together. But so here's what I mean when I say that the financialized economy is hollow to the bone. They never even intended when they started the company to make widgets. They started the company to make it look attractive to the venture capital people so they could sell it. That was it. So it was never a real company. So now when you get down to the foundation of this financialized economy, it's no longer just that venture capital buys the company, hollows it out, takes a bunch of loans and moves on. People are now creating companies specifically for that purpose so that they can make a fortune when they walk away with $250 million between 4 guys. Not a bad deal, but you see where I'm going. You don't have a real economy that can go anywhere when it gets to the point where it's this hollow. It's just the whole thing's a scheme.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to disagree with you. I've seen those many, many times. There's always this scheme to do it. And you say, well, but does this have any value? He says, well, what are you talking about? We can make millions on this deal. And I just, I'd look at them. I remember there was a case involving selling, get this, they were using synthesized debt obligations created in Ireland, sold through Canada. They were selling these to school districts. Now, school districts, when they have cash, They're supposed to invest it in wild things called treasuries, which are supposed to be very, very things. And these guys said, oh, well, all these entities, they had a problem. The state had miscalculated their pension fund contributions. And so, about 60, 70% of them, of these little school districts, towns across Wisconsin, found themselves underwater. They needed to make these pension payments. Now, obviously, elected to the school board, no one wants to hear that the school board rate is going up. So they were primed to accept any kind of deal which, didn't involve going back to the taxpayers and saying, well, the state screwed up and we're increasing your money. It just doesn't work well. So they came in with this cockamamie idea. And, I said, well, this isn't going to work. I don't think it's legal because they're only supposed to buy treasuries and things like that. Second, you're putting the assets that they were putting up on a first bad money tranche. That means that, if anything goes bad, they have to put up assets. Those assets are liquidated to take care of things. Of course, it pays more than a U.S. Treasury because it's a guarantee, it's a backstop. So they thought they could do this, and of course, it all came to tears. The banks were, when everything dissolved, there were these banks from around the world showing up and said, "We own this school. All right, we'd like to charge you rent." And of course, the local officials weren't really in tune with that. And they said, no, it's only zoned as a school. It can only be used as a school. And if you think you're going to come into our town and take our school or make us pay rent, you got another thing coming. In the end, the company that sold these instruments had to basically refund everything to everybody. So it was a bad idea. But at the time, I remember talking to somebody, they said, well, I said, this is going to end in tears. You understand that? And he says, well, yeah, the fees are good. The fees are really good. I was looking at me, I'm like, I felt I was like in some, used car salesman movie. Well, it wasn't driven by little old grandmother, but, profits are really good.
Let me ask you this. And that is, there's more to this than just the dollars. And here's what I mean. I was watching an official from China, and I could see that there was more to this than just the money. That's part of it. But they were saying, look, we've been around for 5,000 years. If we got to take a punch, we can take a punch. But we're not going to be run over by these people. We're not going to get another century, we're not going to get another century of humiliation. We are going to stand our ground for as long as we do. You know what I mean? There was a cultural resistance to, you guys have screwed us over in the past and you're trying to run us over, and doggone it. You know what I mean? You pushed us too far this time. We're standing up. And I saw that thing. Go ahead. Yeah, if you could, from
as they
Beijing,
say,
if you could comment on that.
But you have to understand, I mean, Beijing wasn't doing this out of purely emotion. Trade flows, everybody knows. I mean, it's not like there's a mystery of how much the U.S. is buying and how much the U.S. is selling. The U.S. gives you the numbers, plus every other country in the world, plus the World Bank, IMF, OECD, they're all tracking. So what you have is a situation where all the cards are on the table and everyone can see, China can see America's cards, America can see China's cards, and for everybody in the world. And Donald Trump, for some reason, thought he could come in and say, I have a royal straight flush, right? And the Chinese are looking at his cards going, it looks like you have a pair of twos.
And you have your hand turned around. We can see your hand.
There's
a mirror behind you. We're looking at your hand.
What's so incredibly crazy about it. It's, I show you my cards and say, see, royal straight flush. And you say, that's a 7, an 8, a 4, and a 10. How is that a royal straight flush? But, Donald Trump's idea is, I got a royal straight flush. I'm doubling down. You knuckle under, or else you call me, you kiss my ass, or even more. So, I mean, this is mean, if you were playing poker with something like this, you'd be like, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be good! A really great night." You think you have the royal straight flush? Okay, well, I have three of a kind. Let's see how you roll. Show me. In fact, I can see you don't have it. So, I mean, it wasn't just emotional. China saw the cards, and they said, "Look, this guy is going nowhere." They also understood from a timing point of view everything that we've just been talking about, the fact that you cannot do what he's trying to do. Yes, America needs to figure out a new way of going forward, but this isn't the way. And let me give you an example. You have two paths right now. You can go the manufacturing route, right? Right now, the world is full of manufacturers, right? Yeah, it's not a problem. It's not capacity that's a problem. It's not like, oh, prices are going up because there's a shortage, right? You have very efficient suppliers in Southeast Asia, in China, other places. They have lower costs of labor, building, all of these things. So the idea that you want to get into an area that's heavily competitive, all right, and that has lower profits does that sound strange to you?
No.
Versus, oh, the digital economy, huge potential here. Be a first mover. Develop the solutions that people need that make things more efficient, that makes the country run better, where you can create productivity gains and you can be rewarded from it. And what is needed for this? You need a real good educational system. You need people who are being supported. So here's my choice. I can go for a low level, highly competitive area and rebuild my economy on that, or I could choose to go in the other door where I can earn substantial amounts of money. So what has Donald Trump done? He's saying, well, we're going to put it all in industrialization. And it doesn't make sense. There are two people in his sphere of influence. The first one was this guy, Robert Lighthizer. I'm sure you know him. He was the former U.S. trade representative. 12 years ago, he was putting out this stuff that what America needs to do is use tariffs to force American companies or other companies to build in America. And then he said, he was always talking about unfair policies regarding manipulation of currencies. Well, the truth is the U.S. is the largest manipulator of currency in history. We continue to do that through our trade dollars and other things. We're the ones who are weaponizing all these things. And he doesn't have a retort for that. He's a very arrogant fellow. I mean, he won't even meet with his opposite numbers from other countries. He insists that he has to meet with the prime minister or something like that. And he's a very strange fellow. And then you have Peter Navarro. Peter is an economist of one. They dug him out of some small university where he was, just a kind of a laughing stock among the local economists because he popped forth with these idiotic ideas. But he was found because they couldn't find a legitimate economist who would support Trump's simplistic nonsense. So Peter believes that what is necessary is to drive businesses into the U.S. and then devalue the U.S. dollar by at least 30%. So one day you bought treasuries for $100 and the next day they're worth 70. So you can imagine that is causing some consternation on behalf of people who might think that treasuries are a safe deal. So between these two nutcases, you have this elixir of absolute death for America. They are putting America on the road to bankruptcy because if you undermine the US dollar, no one's going to use it for trade. All right. That treasuries go away. The interest rates go through the roof because people start pricing in their risk for holding treasuries. This means that you'd see treasury prices between 12 and 14%. Right? Now, imagine the US with $36 trillion and 18 of that being refinanced, not at 1 or 2%, but at 12 to 14%. and what that would do to the budget. It would destroy us. So literally, all right, Trump and his team of nitwits are driving the America towards bankruptcy, and he doesn't even understand it. That's what's it's so terrible. I mean, he's surrounded himself with people who, they're more loyal than they are competent. They're expendable. He's running the White House like he ran The Apprentice. It's basically you get together a good, interesting group of people and you sort through them and you use them to, distract from the reality. But The Apprentice is a program. It's not real in the sense that it's going to make a big difference. Whereas running a country, obviously, the stakes are much higher.
Well, and here's the other thing too, and I'd like to get your comment on this. There's been an ideology in America, unfortunately, with some of the both parties have argued this, but and this is bringing the Elon Musk, and it's that we need to run our government like it's a business. The government ain't a bit, and I know you're familiar with that ideology.
Well, I'm a
Now we're
business
running
guy.
like a business.
I don't agree. I know politics.
When I look at China, what China does is they keep their finger on the dial. You know what I mean? The businesses, banks, etc. You've got to mitigate their greed, or their not. I'm not even call it greed. Their propensity to lean into easy ways to make money, and you have to regulate that. So China will turn the dial up. They'll do some regulations. You can't do this. Oh, we're going to put this on hold. Put the brakes on a little bit here and there, and you have to tweak an economy. Right? You have to tweak these businesses. Wherein this ideology here says, let the monsters loose, get out of the way, and let them, stomp their gas going, their foot on the gas going downhill. And it seems to me now that the crew we have now more than anything else are that let's run it like a business. And the businesses, as you said, these investors in the recent years have been, let's make risky investments. And might I add 2008? If I got a bank or an investment house, and I know that if I blow it, that the United States government is going to bail me out, I can take the riskiest investments in the world because I know I'm going to be bailed out, right? It doesn't matter the risk. I know I'm going to be bailed out. And so now they are running it like a business, like risky investors who think they're going to be bailed out, but there's nobody there to bail them out. What do you think? That's the way I see it.
No, I agree. I mean, Bear Stearns might disagree with you.
Yes.
But it was funny. The companies that were related to the Secretary of Treasury, for some reason, they were okay. I think people took note. It's important to have friends in the right places when everything is going downhill. You get saved, and those other ones don't. This financialization thing. You're absolutely right. They're just they just make bigger and bigger bets. The arrogance of these people, and it's not like they're bad people. They're not evil. They justify it, says, look, this is the American way. If I didn't do it, somebody else would. All right. So I'm getting there before the other guys. This is a competition. I said, yeah, but do you have any concerns about the long-term viability? That's not my problem. Right. And this is the business side. That's not my problem. That's government's problem. But when government tries to do something, why is government getting into my business? This is outrageous. And look, China is not a panacea in the sense that it has lots of problems of its own. Sure. The major difference living in China for 20 years between the US and China in terms of the systems is China will see a problem and say, it's a problem. And we need to figure out a solution. Do they always figure out the right solution? No, but they keep going back to the problem until they start making progress on it. In the US, we have a problem. I don't know, elections coming up. I don't know if I want to do something about this problem. This might be unpopular. Let's push it under the carpet. As soon as I get elected, let's take a look at it again. but when they get elected, they say, well, it's a big problem. I don't know everyone can agree. So, we'll leave it till election time. And this
Push a little
process
further
goes
under
on
the
and on. I mean, look at Joe Biden. His greatest claim to fame was that he was reelected for 50 years. That's it. Right? And I mean, people said, well, he was on, this Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I said, do you understand what his specialty was? Joe would come in with his Irish charm. He was a nice guy. And he'd say, fellas, what do you need? What do you want? How do we get to yes on this? What do you need? Pork barrel politics, right off the bat. Hey, and he'd do his homework. This guy wanted a road to his brother-in-law's new real estate venture. This guy wants his name on the university museum. That guy, has some nephews or nieces who need jobs, things like that. They all have these little pressure points. And you just say, hey, come on, we can see past this, so we can make a few amendments here and get it through. The problem with his approach is that he would get the legislation through, but it would never work because there are so many contradictions in there. People who didn't really agree with it would put amendments, which would make it almost impossible to work. So he was always thinking that he was being very, very clever, that he was, chalking up wins, on the plus column, when in actuality he was achieving very, very little. But this is what passes for success in Washington. How many bills did you get through? How many did you write? Well, did they change anything?
Yeah, for the worst most of the time.
Well,
Let me ask you this. I did want to ask you this. So this is something that you've been writing about, talking about, that I definitely want to touch base on. And that is, as an example, Apple says, we're moving to India. We're moving to India. We're going to take all this stuff to India. The heck with China. And as you brought out, yeah, but all of the parts, you're going to assemble your phone in India. Yeah, that doggone, the heck with China. We don't need them. We're assembling the phone in India. And where do all of those parts come from that are assembling the phone? China. So it's a big fraud, and everybody here hears this. Yes, have you heard the Trump administration announces that Apple's done with China. They're finished with them. They want nothing to do with them. They're off to India. But every single part of the phone was made in China. So they're still finding
not all.
But I mean, the important part, only the screen, the chip,
the cameras, the parts, yeah, the plastics, everything like that. Okay, so let's, in case anyone's wondering, let's just break it down. Okay, it costs between $12.50 and $15 for the labor, just pure labor component of an Apple phone. There are 60 million Apple phones made last year. Now, assuming all of them were made in one place, India, okay, what would that mean? Well, in India, the price of labor is 1/33 of the US. So if you paid a guy $100 a day in the US, you'd pay the equivalent guy in India $3. So put that through your things. Now, China is 20%, 1/5. So if you paid somebody $100 in the US, you would pay somebody in China $20. So let's do the math. You move it all to India. You divide 12 and 15 by 6, because that's the coefficient. It'll be 6 times less expensive. Mm-hmm. So that means that you have a little over $2, between $2 and $3, $2 and $2.50. $2 and $2.50 that will now represent the labor side of this. So multiply that times 60 million. Tell me that this is a huge win for India. It might be a PR win, but it's not going to be things. We're talking less than $200 million. Now, it's not all profit, because now, instead of having your supply chain in your backyard, right, you can call for it and it'll show up in either 5 minutes if it's across the street, or by fast rail, all right, if it's across the country, in a matter of less than a day. Well, that's not going to be the story in India. Anything goes wrong, right, your supply chain is still in China. So you have to get it from China to India. That takes time. There isn't a railway that goes directly there. So you're going to be on ships. Ships are going to take weeks. And this is what they discovered when Apple, you remember, they put together that Texas plant.
Yes.
And then they closed it. You know why? They couldn't get little screws. They couldn't find them locally, and they had to send to China for them. And they have to put on these boats, all right, and then, shipped over. And they said the supply chain logistics just don't work, not because of the intellectual property or anything like that. It came down to a bunch of little screws. So this is the part that people overlook. They think it's just simple. You move things around, but this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Corporate America is learning. You make grand gestures that mean absolutely nothing. All right. The investment that Apple will have to make in order to move things to India, they have to rent offices. They have all these things will actually be more than any savings that they have from pushing it there. But they calculated risk. It says, look, we'll do this to appease Trump. And then if it's not working out, 4 years from now, we switch it back, or we go somewhere else. We'll go wherever it's best for us. But right now, China's biggest advantage, other than the fact that they have a government that looks at the issues, and a report card. This is something that people don't understand. Every single year, the government has to get up and say, this is what we promised. Did we do it or not? And there's a tremendous amount of pressure to do that. Can you imagine if they did that with Congress? You made all these promises, Senator, collectively, individually. Did you accomplish anything? Wow, can you imagine how much fun that would be? So they do that, but then they have this, they're driving the efficiency of their logistics and also their production. They're embracing technology. They're automating things. There are more robots installed in China than the entire rest of the world on a yearly basis. And this has been happening for the last six, 7 years. And they're trying to drive the cost down of production in China so that they remain competitive, even though as their labor costs continue to go up. So their thinking is, I don't need to, it's not productive, and I can't, no one will work for, $3 a unit to do this, but we can have a robot do that, and we can employ somebody who knows how to fix that robot, or to make that robot, or the parts that go into its design and maintenance. So they're trying to climb the value chain. They're going towards the digital economy, the one where you can make lots of money, the future. Whereas Donald Trump is stuck in the past. He has this idea that if we went back to World War II times, this would be great. We would rule the roost. We'd be 50% of the world's output. I don't recall. I'd be very interested to see if he was in the dominant position, whether he'd say, this is unfair to these other countries, as he's saying now.
As an example, my mother, when she was young, she worked for a factory called Comfort Spring Factory, and they made the springs for beds. And it was they bent metal, and they, the springs for beds and all, and that's what factories did then. They had machines, and they bent metal, and they made these things, and they sent them, and those were the kinds of things that people did to make a living. And you had factories all over America doing those. And another guy worked for Malco Plastics, and they made toys and things, parts for toys and things like that. And that's the low level of the value chain, right? But that's not the kind of, and that's like what our leadership in America is talking, like we can build these kind of factories and people can bend metal and make plastic for toys and things like that now. And even if they wanted to do that, even if that were the case, as an example, if China is 5 times cheaper for the labor, forget India, 5 times cheaper for the labor, and we've got to get the parts from China to come to the factories to make the things here. So you got to ship them here and then pay somebody to make them here from China, might I add. And we got tariffs on China, which means the parts that you're buying for your factories, supposedly factories here, are tariffed and they're overpriced. So why not make them there? It still doesn't make, even so many things that we wouldn't be making in these mythical factories would be using things that were heavily tariffed because they're coming from China in the first place. It makes no sense.
Well, and going back to what we were discussing earlier, if you're a businessman and you're looking to make profit, does this sound like an opportunity of a lifetime? I don't think so.
What about the last thing I'd like to ask you is about aircraft? I know that's a big one because I think this is like a death knell for Boeing because they're selling lots of aircraft. I know Russia now has an aircraft that is all Russian parts, nothing else, that they're making their own, and they want to get into the business. China, they've got, I forgot the name of it, Sea Flot, whatever it is. They're
C-19.
yeah, they're getting in the business. What a stupid time to set Boeing up to not stop selling it. I mean, the competitors are starting to rise. I couldn't think of a worse time than to poke Boeing right in the eye than right now with what, I mean, it's possible that Donald Trump is killing Boeing.
Well, Boeing never goes away because it'll be supported by the defense industry.
Yeah.
They produce a lot of aircraft for the defense industry, and quite frankly, they will never allow that to be offshored.
Right.
So, and the same thing with our friends over in Europe and China. So you have a situation where right now, well, there are a few Boeing planes available since China refused to take delivery. But if a year ago you wanted to order a plane, you would be 17, 18 years out. That means you order today, you'll get delivery in 17 or 18 years. That points to there's more demand than there is supply. China, they can make a plane, but what they lack are avionics.
Yeah.
The software side of it. Now, I have no doubt they're going to solve that, okay, over time, because we're denying them once again. We talk about we're denying them chips, but we're denying them that. And Russia obviously has their own avionics packages and things like that. So it's quite probable that you are, exactly as you said, going to see large entities competing in this field. But it takes time. China has factories right now that could be turning out 100 a day. They're only turning out a few, 6, not a day, 100 a year. They're only turning out 6. Why? Because they say, well, we're going to field test it.
Right.
I mean, it makes so much sense rather than trying to push out a bunch of planes, Boeing, that don't work. People get a little bit afraid to be on a Boeing plane because they keep hearing about fires and doors falling off and crashes and things like that. And, you took an old design and you just put larger engines on it. I mean, yeah, jets are basically rocks with fins and engines. But the fact is when you design an airplane, and Boeing used to be the tops at this, everything was run by the engineers. It was based on the design and what was necessary to make a good design to keep people safe. And they were legendary for the fact that things were not run in the CEO's office. But then what happened? Well, the CEOs moved to Chicago. You remember that? They got some big tax breaks and they moved 50 guys to Chicago so they could get billions of dollars in tax breaks. But what that means is these guys are living in Chicago. They weren't walking around on the factory floor. Prior to that, all right, the CEO and the executive suite were down on the floor. They were talking to the engineers. They were getting real things. When they're in Chicago, they're getting reports from people. The reports are generally whatever the people making the reports think the guys at the top want to hear. And they're like saying, well, cut costs, do more with less, but they're not talking. They're just giving orders. Now, Boeing is moving to Washington because that's where they can lobby for defense monies. I understand what they're doing, but they're not running a company anymore. They're basically running a part of the U.S. government that taxes the U.S. people without sharing any benefits. It's not like Boeing stock is distributed to Americans across the United States. Those go to the people, quote, who invested. but the people who are paying the bills are the American taxpayers. And as I said, no benefit to them, just a lot of pain and heartache as what was once an iconic, and I really mean that, iconic company is really kind of just fallen away. I mean, having your CEO in Washington is not going to solve your problems in Seattle.
I would also imagine this, as we see the global South rise, we see what's going on in the Sahel region with Burkina Faso and different countries in Africa that are starting to, align with Russia and China. They're starting to build, kind of get away from colonialism. The time will come when they'll say, okay, we're selling gold from our gold mines. We want our own, whatever, Burkina Faso Airlines, right? Okay. At that point, you don't want to buy from the US or Europe because you're going to be concerned that they're going to sanction you and they're going to say you can't buy parts. That's like they did to Russia. You can't buy parts for our planes. You can't buy this. If you're the global South countries, as you develop, you're going to say, I'll go to Russia or China or, one of these countries that are not aligned with the US or not aligned. You're more likely, because you're going to be concerned that you'll spend all of this money on planes and you'll get sanctioned again. The whole sanction thing and the whole punitive and coercive use of economics is going to burn them and really hurt them as developing countries rise, I believe.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a question of reliability. If I'm a businessman, I don't go to somebody I know who can hurt me. I don't sole source on somebody who I know can, at a moment's notice, change their mind, not based on business, but based on what they want. All right. I'm going to go to somebody who I see as reliable, who has a long-term vision that's aligned with mine, that this is about trade. It's not about ideology or anything like that. And that's what China has been very successful at. They don't push an ideology. They don't say American exceptionalism is the only way. And if you don't agree with that, well, we might have to kill you or get rid of you. China says, look, you do you, we do us, let's trade. And that is very, very attractive these days. Now, growing China obviously creates new issues. There's never a solution that doesn't create new problems. And this is one of the things that it always bothers me, because people say, oh, well, it's solved. I said, no, it's not solved. This part is solved. Now start thinking about the next set of problems and the next set of solutions. And if you're smart enough, think about the problem, the solution, the new problems, and the solutions after that. If you can think that far ahead, it's like playing chess. You're going to win. I lecture CEOs about this. They always say vision and talk about a lot of nonsense as far as I'm concerned about, leadership and message and all this stuff. I said, no, that's not vision. That's just getting the message out there. Vision is understanding your business and understanding what's going to happen or likely to happen, and then anticipating what your responses are as many moves in advance as possible. And then you get all the pieces together. That's vision, right? What's necessary to happen? Where can we make money? All right. And how will this be managed? But that is in short supply these days, as people, instead of looking at the fundamentals, they look at the politics.
To end this up, your thoughts on how, China, of course, Trump's thing is, yes, they're going to come to me eventually. China's saying, we ain't coming to you, not even eventually.
Waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How long does this last? How does this end? Is there any way of even predicting? Or are you just saying we'll find out? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I hate pointing to problems without suggesting a solution. That's I always tell people. I said, look, when you're new in a business and you're going to your boss and you see a problem, don't be the guy who shows up and say, oh, there's a problem. All right, go to them with several different solutions and suggest, okay, this, because it shows that you're thinking about it. Okay, that you're potentially a better employee, somebody who can understand problems, solve them, and perhaps in the future even prevent problems. So in terms of how long this lasts, this is about 2 months tops. And why do I say that is by the time that the additional costs, and it's not just China. We keep talking about China, but these tariffs are on everything. 1 out of every 4 US dollars that's spent by consumers is on imported goods. So they're all being tariffed. So when these are fully realized in the American markets, because remember, there are warehouses full of stuff. People were
Right.
front loading. But after 2 months, that's gone. And prices continue to rise. And people in America who are now buying groceries on buy now, pay later. In essence, paying 300 to 500% additional cost just to eat because they're so desperate and they don't have any credit. They don't have cash, right? These people cannot stand these things. So a lot of his base, they're going to go, there's going to be a split in his base as they say he betrayed us. Remember, love and hate, very close. And when that happens, he's got to retreat. And Donald's way of retreating isn't saying I'm sorry. What he says is I'll fire this guy. He had a bad idea, and this is victory. Actually, you think it's defeat, but actually it's victory. Okay, what's the solution? Well, I alluded to it earlier with this idea that America needs to figure out where the future is. Where are the best chances? We need to return to a Sputnik moment where we start investing in ourselves. A nation where where 60% of your people read at or below a 6th grade level is not ready for the digital revolution. In China, it's 99% if you're under 45.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, there's just, China has 7 times the number of engineers and things like that. So with these realities, we need to figure out what our strengths are. We have incredible universities, all right? We can offer people, if you make something and do something, you'll be rewarded. But we need to have a finance system that puts money into these guys, all right, the future, as opposed to making bets on what's going to happen at the next Fed meeting. And this is all public policy. This is somebody with a vision who says, this is what we need to do. And, it's
but how are we going to get you to come back here and run for president? That's the only problem.
Oh God,
these clowns we have will never buy.
You don't understand. I had done a lot of things at the city of Milwaukee, and somebody suggested to me, maybe jokingly, that I run for mayor because I'd done the finances and a bunch of other stuff. And I said, look, what did I ever do to you?
Right.
I mean, come on. I thought we were friends. I thought you liked me. I mean, climbing into the cesspit of politics. And I tell you, it's a failing of mine. I really should be willing to do that, since I was involved in electing them and I knew all these guys, but it just seemed endless. The people who run in politics generally, and you can back me up, these aren't people with a vision. They're people with a chip on their shoulder. They didn't get enough respect at, whatever, I don't know, in grade school, or somebody said something and they say, oh, I'm going to be somebody important. You're going to have to respect me. You will have to, because I have the office, I have the power, things like that. Well, what are you going to do with it? Well, I'll help people, whatever. I'll be there. And we had a mayor in Milwaukee. He was a nice enough guy. I gave him some money early on to run for Congress. And I'd have lunch with him every, year. And I'd ask him what he had done. And when he ran, I says, the only thing I ask is that, Wisconsin is always in the loss column when it comes to return on federal dollars. And while there are states with great needs, I noticed that the states with the largest amounts of plus side in terms of getting things are the ones who are not doing well. I mean, down in the South, you had these senators who'd been there for umpteen years, and the money would drain down towards Mississippi, Arkansas, all these places, but there wasn't any change. All right. So it wasn't a matter of money. So I said, listen, just be fair. make sure that we get a return on a dollar, and don't put it into wasteful stuff. Just make sure that we're getting a return on the money that we're sending to Washington. And then year after year, I talked to him. He just said, well, these guys don't play nicely. And I said, well, who are your friends? Who are you talking to? Well, my best friend is a backbencher who feels like me that we shouldn't get involved in any of this stuff. And he was a nice guy. He ran under the theory of Mr. Smith goes to Washington. I want to go there and change things. But he wasn't prepared to do what is necessary. My grandmother told me, says, Einar, be careful, know the difference between what you're interested in and care about. If you're interested, you don't have to do anything. But if you care about something, by definition, you have to do something. And once you start doing something, you cannot stop. If it is important and it needs to be done, you need to see it through. All right. You cannot say, I care, and then fail to create the change that you think is important. If you do that, that's a reflection on you. So she always said, be very, very careful about what you care about. Know the difference. So that's a lesson that stuck with me. And I wish there were more people and places in power in both finance and politics who understood that and would follow through on it.
Yeah. Well, I'll end by saying this. The one thing that no one's talking about that I've been discussing lately is you have to be careful when you change people's shopping habits. And what I mean is this: when a lot of people go to Walmart, things like that, and they buy Amazon, whatever, and they're impulse buyers and they buy this and that, right? When the shelves are empty, people will stop. Oh, okay, there's nothing in there. Okay, I'm not going to go to much, blah, blah, blah. And the impulse buys will go away and they will change their shopping habits. Even when you fix it and you bring that stuff back, you've changed their shopping habits. And they're not going to change them back. And I think what they'll find is they're going to blow this thing up. It's going to be a disaster. And they're going to go, oh my God, what have we done? They're going to find a way. It'll take months. They'll somehow get the shopping. Oh my God, the truckers, how are they losing their trucks? How are we going to get them? They have to put all this money to put Humpty Dumpty back together again if they can. But the shopping habits of people will have changed. And when they fill these shelves up and everything gets back, they'll say, okay, the customers are back. And the customers will say, we don't shop like that anymore. We used to wander through the stores and buy from impulse, but the stuff's not there. So we just kind of chill out now. And they're going to say, oh my gosh, we blew. That's a prediction that I think I haven't discussed much, but I suspect that will be the case. Dr. Einar Tangen is a senior fellow at the Taihe Institute, founding partner of the Center for China and the World at City University of Macau, senior fellow for the Center of International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics, and founder and chairman of Asia Narratives. Go to his Substack, Asia Narratives. Great stuff. We really appreciate you giving us a view of things from Beijing. And I hear it's beautiful. One of these days, I got to get to bed. That's one of my dreams. I would
love to have you here
these days. Yes, that's where I got to get. But at any rate, thank you very much. What's that?
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion. I like your questions and the direction going. And I have to say that I completely share your sentiments about the concerns. I want to add one thing. I'm not a doctorate. I have a doctorate of laws.
JD, you got a JD.
JD.
Yeah. So there we go.
I don't like to say I'm a doctor. I don't want anyone to say, oh, he's pretending he's a doctor.
Juris Doctorate. So we can go with
Juris
that.
Doctorate. But that's a little iffy. I don't know many lawyers who say, oh, I don't know, call me doctor.
So, well, thank you very much and look forward to talking to you again soon.
My pleasure.
All right. Okay, everybody, don't forget, the important thing is you are very important. All 587 people or whatever that we had watching, and the many, many thousands that will watch over the next couple of days. Here is what is important. Unlike MSNBC or CNN, we don't have Pfizer and Boeing and everybody donating money to us, so we don't have advertisement. You have to share this on all your social media platforms. Everyone that watches this, share it on your social media platforms, X or Telegram or whatever the case may be. Give other people the opportunity to see this. Thank you very much. And Dr. Einar, how about it, since we're friends? Einar, I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everyone. We're out.